Hello YouTube, back once again with my film reviews, and the other night I watched the straight-to-Netflix release of The Little Prince, the adaptation of the famous children's story, and yeah, let's talk about it. Let me just say this, I was super excited to see this movie. I do really love the story of The Little Prince, so I was really excited to see an adaptation, film adaptation of it, and yeah, and so let's talk about the concept of this movie. It's about okay, let me just say this. This isn't, if you were hoping for, like, a very, like, faithful adaptation of the source material, it's not this. This is much more an inspired by adaptation of it, because the premise of this version is it's about a little girl who, moves to a new town and she starts befriending her neighbor, who is the navigator, who's the main character of the story of The Little Prince, who she meets an old man who's the navigator, and starts befriending him, and he starts telling her the story of the Little Prince that he met in the Sahara while stranded in the Sahara Desert, and yeah, that's the concept of the movie, and yeah, so, the good and bad of this movie. The good. Let me just say this. The first half of this movie is just wonderful from beginning to end. Like, this is just a beautiful movie, the first half. It has such a wonderful simplicity, because really the first half of this movie is nothing more than just this girl going over to, the navigator's house, and him telling her the story of the Little Prince, and that's basically it. Like, there's, like, no real villain, there's no real conflict. Like, it's just her like hearing the story of the Little Prince, and like learning how its themes like ties into her own life, and it is so wonderfully simplistic that way, and that and when they do the story of the Little Prince, because I really liked how they did the story of the Little Prince, like when they did like start just doing the flat adaptation of the book, like the fact that she would get pages of the story from the navigator, and I love the fact that like the pages were very accurate to the book. Like, the drawings were, like, they did animate the drawings, the famous drawings from the book. I did really love that. I really did love that touch. But then from there, when they start telling the story, when they do the flashbacks, it's done in just gorgeously jaw-dropping stop-motion animation. It just looks so beautiful and fantastic. Like, every time, like, it made my eyes water in just how fantastic everything looked. It just had this, like the story itself, it just had this wonderful simplicity. Like, it wasn't like, it wasn't something like The Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline, and don't get me wrong, those movies look gorgeous, but I love how for the fact it is such a simplistic story, like The Little Prince, they do the same thing with the stop motion. Like, the stop motion is very simplistic. Like, there is, like, the faces are not very detailed. Like, it does look like it almost looks like you're watching a puppet show to a certain degree, like a really fantastically done, like, wooden marionette show. Like, and they do even, like, I do feel like that was what they was going for, because there's all these lovely touches, like there's there's this whole thing, like how, like, in one scene, like when the pilot's the navigator is looking up into the sky, like, and the stars start coming out, like the stars like come down and they're like held up by string, like that's fully animated. Like, I do feel like that's what they're going for, and it does just look so beautiful. And not just that, though, the voice acting from the voice acting from The Little Prince, it's done by the director's son. He does such a great job, just having such a wonderful, like, naive, innocent voice. Just kind of the idea of like how it does capture the idea of Little Prince, just like kind of like this naive, like, and a very naive being who just like wants to learn about the world, and he does do such a great job voice acting. And I do also applaud the fact that this does not at all shy away from how the story ends. They do the ending of the story of the Little Prince, and I'm so glad they did not cut that out, because I do always feel that's probably the most powerful moment of this story, and I'm so glad they kept it. So yeah, the adaptation, when they do The Little Prince, like, all the parts when they do that story, it's so wonderfully done. Like, and it is mainly, for the most part, just taken straight from the books. So that was great. When they did the story of The Little Prince, it looked beautiful, it sounded beautiful, and they did not shy away from its darker moments. So that was great. But not just that. the other part of the first half of the movie, because like I said, this is not the main character of this movie is not the navigator. It's a little girl who meets an elderly version of the navigator. That's also so wonderfully handled. Because let me just say, the friendship between the navigator and the little girl, voiced by Jeff Bridges and Mackenzie Foy, the girl who did young Jessica Chastain in Interstellar, they had such a wonderful, like, legitimate friendship with each other. They really did sell it with that. These two really did bond with one another in this movie. The fact that this girl, for the most part, was more like obsessed with work than like enjoying life, and him and her and this guy just like showing her like a more imaginative, like wonderful world. Like you fully buy into like why this girl would get so attached to this guy and like start building such a strong friendship with him, and so their friendship was so heartwarming from beginning to end, and I was gonna say, I do love how they did tie the themes of The Little Prince, like its messages and morals, its themes, into modern day society, because I feel that was such a clever idea. I know, like, purists may be very angry for how much they added, like, during the first half, like I said, the fact that the navigator's not the main character, it's the little girl, but I felt it really worked, because they did tie it in its themes into modern society, because, like, for, like, the major theme of The Little Prince, more than anything, is the whole idea of, it's not about growing up, growing up is not like the huge problem with life and how people like lose imagination, joy. It's not because they grow up, it's just because they lose sight of that. They just forget how to enjoy life, how to be imaginative, how to not just like be trying to work for something like success and never actually being happy. Like it's not that they get old, it's just the fact that they just forget, they just don't have sight of that anymore. And I love the fact that they did tie it in with today's society, because there is just this, like, there's such an ungodly amount of stress put on kids nowadays, like, with, like, so much, like, standardized testing and, state testing, and, like, not just that, like, there's, like, this whole idea of, like, a lot of people are complaining, like, that, like, it seems like the government's, like, somewhat ripping away, like, the joy and imagination of, like, children going to school, well, not children going to school, but just, like, what children learn in school, for, like, the fact, like, there's this whole thing now, like, that, for the most part, like, government doesn't want, schools doing any, fiction stories for reading or anything like that. They only want it to be non-fiction, and it's just, like, why, like, deprave kids from, like, that sense of joy, like, from, like, joy or imagination or anything like that. And I do love the fact that they do, like, and it does work great for the fact they do tie in today's society with that message from The Little Prince. It does do a great job at that, and it just works. That's all I can say. This movie just has such a wonderful simplicity during that first half, just how they handle all this, and it's just great. Like, not just and going back to, like, the kids, like, kids, like, being overstressed, like, there's so much, like, stress from parents, like, nowadays, like, to have their kids, like, take, like, the most advanced classes, like the highest grades, like the highest testing, get the best, like, SAT scores they can, what have you, and like because of that, just kids, like, do just get really overworked, and like they do just become miserable, and they just do become they just kind of do lose that sense of joy and imagination, and it is really great, the fact that that's basically the dilemma the main character's going through, the fact that her mother has all these unbelievable high expectations for her, like, her whole day is, like, basically just her working on schoolwork for the most part, and she doesn't, like, enjoy life because of it, and I do really applaud this movie. It does such a great job at just tying in the theme from The Little Prince to today's society, and I really do think the addition of the little girl was such a wonderful idea. And so yeah, first half of this movie is just a beautifully simplistic movie. Unfortunately, we had the second half to this movie. Okay, let me stress this right now. The second half of this movie is not bad. It is just noticeably a lot worse than the first half. Like I said, the first half had this wonderfully simplicity to it. Like, the second half feels more like they were trying to the first half kind of felt like they were gearing it towards anyone of any age. The second half definitely felt they were gearing it more towards the children audience. Like, it really just felt like you're almost like, oh, decent kid affair, but nothing great, because it just loses all that simplicity. Like, it tries to be much more action packed. Like, the messages become very literal. Like, the whole idea of just like how the girl like encounters the little prince as an adult, and like he's like lost all sense of joy and imagination, and like he's just like a working stiff. Like, it becomes very literal and awkward, and it just doesn't feel as nearly intelligent or treats its audience as intelligently as that first half did. Like, the first half, like I said, just had this simplicity. Like, the second half just feels like it's being very obvious with everything, and like, not just that though. Okay, the second half of this movie, it's the little girl. Like, she meets a man called Mr. Prince, who's supposed to be the grown-up version of the little prince, and he's voiced by Paul Rudd, and Paul Rudd, I'm just saying this right now, Paul Rudd's awful in this, and I usually love Paul Rudd, but he is just really badly miscast in this. His voice is just so distracting from beginning to end. Like, the moment he says his first word, my only thought, oh, that's not a character, that's just Paul Rudd acting right there. This is always the risk you run when you get celebrities to voice your characters in movies, that you can really start, like, if it doesn't fit well, you can really stop seeing a character and just seeing the voice actor doing the character, and Paul Rudd does it's just really distracting with him, because he does seem to be playing this somewhat sarcastically, or at least sounds sarcastic, I don't know. That's just kind of what Paul Rudd sounds like to me on a regular basis, but it really doesn't work for this role, because you do just want that simplicity, but you don't get it. Like, he does, like, this should have been a more somber, like, voice performance, but he's being really obvious. He's being really, like, Paul Rudd-y, like, just being very sarcastic and, like, trying to get a laugh out of you, and, it just doesn't work with this role, and he really does. The entire second half of this movie, I was just getting really annoyed by him for being to end, but, I will say this, though, the movie does really pull it back together in the last third. Not in the last third, in the end, and the end of this movie, it really starts bringing itself back together. Like, it really brings itself back to the greatness of the first half, and let me just say, the ending to this movie is a real tearjerker. Like I was getting teary-eyed at the ending. They brought up the themes of bringing back the themes to the prince, and how things are starting to end with the characters, and I do love the last shot of this movie, like how this movie ends, like the final image. I just do find such a wonderful just pulled on my heartstrings, the final moments of this movie. So, that's Little Prince. So in total, I'm going to give The Little Prince a very solid 4 out of 5. On the whole, I would say I love this, and I thought it was great. It could have been better, though. This really, if they could keep that feeling they had during the first half, I would honestly, through the entirety of the movie, I would honestly say this is probably one of the greatest animated movies of, like, the past 20 years, but as it sits, it's a great one. Definitely worth a watch. If you have a Netflix account, go watch it now if you haven't already seen it. It's truly great. YouTube, as always, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.